Patrick's celebrations here at James J.Fox. Given our Irish connection, it would be remiss of us not to have a night full of fine Irish whiskey and some excellent smokes, some good Irish snacks for your enjoyment. For any of you not so familiar with our shop, I'd encourage you to please check out our museum if you get the chance. Being the world's oldest cigar merchants, dating back to as far as 1787 for trade, we must show off some of our history and have you please enjoy it. We've got the likes of Sir Winston Churchill's chair down there, what's at least reputed to be the world's oldest box of cigars, boxes of Cuban cigars that is, from the Great Exhibition of 1851, as well as plenty of other tidbits for you to check out. On a more somber note, I would like to let those of you that don't already know about the passing of Cecil, a very regular customer here, a really beloved figure and a part of furniture in his own right in this store. For those of you who don't know him by name, he was the chap who would often be in a wheelchair, sat downstairs in the corner, often immaculately dressed, and telling people they're wrong about everything but making everyone laugh in the process. Would normally be after a night like this, I'd find myself over in the Stafford with him and I'd wind him up for not getting the mystery cigar right, and he'd tell me what a twat I am. But he will be missed, so for those of you that do know, for anyone like to pay respect to a brother of the leaf, I would encourage you to send a little smoke up there to him. Please raise a glass for Cecil. And on a lighter note, I'm joined tonight by David McGrane and Darren Choffey. Darren Choffey, where are you? Over there. To tell you a little bit more about what we're drinking and what we're going to be smoking for the evening. So please, David.
Centre, I have to get my notes out first. First 4 dozen pages. Well, I have to say, because I am Irish, Lá Fhéile Pádraig Tuilleadh Bid, which means Happy St. Patrick's Day to all. So it's a pleasure for me to be here this evening, and I hope to be able to pass on the pleasure to you by sampling some famous Irish whiskey. Tonight we're going to sample some Teeling single grain, some Teeling small batch, and Teeling malt. All these whiskies have their own characteristics. I'd like to share a few facts with you about Irish whiskey. In the year 600, whiskey was started to be distilled in Ireland. It was brought back to Ireland by the monks who learned the art of distillation in Italy, where the Italians were distilling wines. So when they brought it back, the idea was to distill for medicinal purposes and for perfumes. So being good Irishmen, it didn't take them long to realise that if they used the native product, they could turn it into something more palatable. And that's when Irish whiskey started. It's recorded that in 1541, you'll be interested in this, that it was the favourite drink of Elizabeth I. She liked to have a little tip of Irish whiskey. It was also the favourite drink of Peter the Great, who said it was the nice Irish was the nicest spirit of Ireland. Unfortunately then, the British government in 1641 imposed tax on whiskey because, yes, they haven't changed. They realised that the sale of whiskey was getting out of hand. Most whiskey, Irish whiskey was the biggest selling spirit at that stage. When you see cowboy films and they ask for whiskey, that was always Irish whiskey they drank. Unfortunately, when the British brought in the tax on whiskey, it encouraged the illicit distilling of Irish whiskey. So the greatest hated man in Ireland was the revenue officer, and he used to prowl the land looking for little columns of smoke where the farmers were creating their own little blend, which was called poitín. The word poitín is the Irish for a small still. Unfortunately, the whiskey trade declined a little bit then because they were all making it themselves. Around the 1800s, Irish whiskey really began to grow in the United States and Canada. With the amount of Irish people that were emigrating and moving around the world, they brought the art of distillation to them. Unfortunately then, in 1725, another tax was put on. It was called the malt tax. And the malt tax in Scotland was received very, very badly. And in fact, there was riots, soldiers were held prisoners, and in fact some people died because of the attacks. But the Irish had a different way of looking at it. What they decided was they would use half malted whisky and half unmalted whisky, and this way they would avoid paying tax on all of what they produced. That blend of malted and unmalted whisky is what created Irish hot still, which is unique to this day. What more can I say? In 1755, Samuel Johnston put Irish whisky in his dictionary. He called it a pleasant and mild drink. And then we moved on. Then it went all downhill, unfortunately, because of an Irishman. A revenue officer called Aeneas Coffey invented, it had been invented and patented in West Cork before this, but he improved on it, and it was called a column still or a coffee still, and it was a cheap way of making usually gin, but it was also adapted to cheap whisky. It was adopted by the Scots to create a cheaper form of whisky and to create blends of whisky, but the Irish decided to stay with the traditional way of making whisky with pot stills, which was a more expensive way of making whisky. But it meant that the Scots could take the upper hand in the whisky producing at that time. At that stage there was 400 brands of Irish whisky on sale and 160 distilleries in Ireland. Then things got even worse for Irish whisky. Prohibition came into the United States. The Irish government could not export whisky to the United States. Bootleggers began to copy Irish whisky badly, and it ruined the reputation. Just today, as people make copies of Cohiba and so on, it ruined the reputation of Irish whisky. Like when Prohibition lifted, they had a bad taste on Irish whisky. There was then an economic war in 1921 between Ireland and the United Kingdom. There was trade tariffs were put on goods coming from Ireland. So Irish whisky was already expensive. So with extra tariffs being put on it, it prevented Irish whisky being exported to the rest of the empire. So we lost sales in Australia and Canada and India. Our own civil war didn't help. So Irish whisky lay in the doghouse for some years. You may not know it, but whisky is regarded under EU law as a food product. Now, in Ireland we've known that for years. But because Irish whisky is controlled as a food product, it is under the control of our Department of Agriculture. And they have very stringent laws for the production. It can only be made on the island of Ireland. It can only be made from barley or made or corn from the island of Ireland. It has to be stored in wooden casks, usually in oak, for 3 years and 1 day before it can be called whisky. In the last few years, a large number of distilleries have opened up in Ireland. Teeling are among them. Teeling is the first distillery to open up in Dublin in 200 years. Their father, John Teeling, was originally in the ladies' underwear business, and he bought a distillery. And somebody said to him, "You don't drink, you don't smoke. Why did you buy a distillery?" And he said, "I made an awful lot of money out of ladies' underwear." And he said, "I never wore that either." So, Cooley Distillery traded from 1987 to fairly recently, when they sold out to Jim Beam and eventually sold out to Santoni. So Cooley Distillery are re-evaluating their products at the moment. But John Teeling's 2 sons have opened up his distillery here in Dublin, and while they are only open 2 years in Dublin, they're using some of their father's whiskies to enter onto the market. Other distilleries like Dingle have produced whisky, and only in December of this year, their whisky, they have started to sell their own blended whisky and their own pot still whisky. Pot still whisky, the whole flavouring of pot still whisky comes from the fact that it's distilled 3 times. And as it's distilled 3 times, the chemical balance of the whisky changes, which gives it that very mellow, soft taste that we expect from pot still whiskey, different from malt whiskey. As I say, whiskey lay in the doldrums for years until 1966, until John Jameson and Powers joined together to form Irish Distillers. They have traded on and were eventually taken over by Pernod Ricard. In the last few years, Irish whiskey has grown by over 13 to 15% per annum, mostly to Asia and America and Australia. People are beginning to realise what Irish whiskey was. It is a very soft whiskey. It doesn't plough your palate, it lets you savour. It opens up the sense to enjoy a cigar. So if you use a cigar, no matter what strength of cigar you wish to smoke, it's something that lets your palate take it in. So I think I've said enough really about Irish whiskey. If you want to ask any questions, I can answer them. I'm open. So the first one you try tonight is the single grain. Single grain is a column still whiskey. It's a basic whiskey. It's not made in the Irish method. It's made in the column still, which was invented by Ennis Coffey. It's the thing about this whiskey is it has been aged in Burgundy barrels, which gives it that touch of sweetness. It's a corn whiskey. The next whiskey I will try is what's called a small batch. And if you've had all that whiskey, you want to try something a small batch, and somebody's prepared to pour it out, we'll move on. The small batch is a whiskey that it's a mixture of rum. It's a column still whiskey blended with a malt whiskey. So again, it's bringing you into this flavour of Irish whiskey. We will then move on to a malt whiskey.